Hello everyone, welcome back to Spar and Brawl. Hope you're having a decent day. So, since the last time we spoke about Iran last week, there's been a bunch of developments, including the Iranians rejecting an offer by the US to resume nuclear talks and the Israelis accusing Iran of bombing their ship. So, Sam is going to give us all the latest concerning Iran and some other related topics. So, Sam, how's it going?
Good, thanks, and thanks for watching. As always, please like, subscribe, all that shit. And I just wanted to, yeah, give you an update. Let me just give you a background that there was a bit of escalation of tensions between US and Iran during the last month or so, so to speak, because everybody expected Biden to come back to the deal very fast, but he didn't. They said they're not gonna take the first steps and they're not gonna come back to the deal immediately. They said it's gonna be a long process. There were attacks on US bases in northern and southern Iraq, in Kurdistan, and there was a US contractor that died. These attacks were claimed by Shia militias that US claims they are backed by Iran. In response to those, or at least US claimed that in response to those, they bombed Iranian facilities within Syria near the border to Iraq, which they said are being used to smuggle weapons and drugs and other things, basically, for Iranian regime or for Syrian regime. So they bombed those, and pretty much a lot of people from the left and few people from the Democratic people criticized him and saying that this is just going to make it harder for US to go back to the deal. So even though there was this offer by the EU and US for informal meeting, the actions of US and to a lesser extent actions of Iran, which has ramped up its nuclear activities. It has somewhat limited nuclear inspection by IAEA. So both sides ramped up tensions before this offer. Then there was this offer, but then Iran rejected this offer, and the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran said that considering the recent actions and positions that the US and the three European countries have taken, Iran does not find this to be the right moment to enter informal talks or any kind of negotiations. That's what they said. But Wall Street Journal, on the other hand, reports that Iran wanted guarantees that right after the informal meeting, there will be some kind of sanction relief, or at least certain sanctions will be lifted, or something like that. And US was not willing to give that guarantee. So even when it seems that they want Iran to come back to negotiations without anything, they're not willing to play a game and allow Iran to have at least the diplomatic victory, no matter how empty it is. So that seems to be the reason that those talks fell through. But interestingly, just a couple of hours ago, Ned Price, the spokesperson for the foreign for the Secretary of State, sorry, in U.S. they call Foreign Ministry State Department, so I don't understand that at all. But Ned Price came out and said that yeah, the door for negotiations open, and we are not picky, or we are not very, we are not tied to a specific time or a place for further talks or further negotiations, which is somewhat of a, it seems to be a bit of a retreat from their earlier position last week, I believe 5 days ago, when Ned Price said that U.S. patience for Iran to come back to the negotiation table has limits, which was seen is not unlimited. If I'm quoting him right, is not unlimited. So I think they were, yeah, it seems that at least rhetorically they seem to have backed off a little, and now they're saying that they're not, the door is open for further negotiations and talks at this moment. So this is basically what's been happening with regard to Iran and US deal, and
So just one thing about this. So the Iranians are really sticking to their guns, which is that they want some sanctions to be relieved before they even resume talks, right? But I guess the
to
other
be
thing,
honest,
yeah.
even now they seem that Iranians kind of again said that they are willing to enter talks if, like, after the talks you announce. So
Mm-hmm.
again, like at least in eyes of the world, not behind the scenes, it seems like Iran is taking the first step.
Mm-hmm.
So again, yeah, it seems that US is the one who's really sticking to
Yeah.
their guns. I agree with you. Iran is not really playing softball or anything, but still, relatively speaking. Oh, sorry, by the way, about the
No, no,
noises.
that's
Um,
very true. But so, and then one other thing though. So then the U.S. is saying there's no timeline now. We're a bit more flexible. But the other thing to bear in mind that we've talked about a few times are the Iranian elections, right? So I mean, I think if it gets really close to that, then that's also going to change things. And then there'll be the elections, which are in the summer. I think you said, right, in June,
yes, yes,
which
they're
is
in the
not far
summer.
away.
It's less, yeah,
Three
it's
to
about
four
six,
months.
no, no, less than 6 months,
Yeah,
definitely less
three
than
to
six
four
months.
months. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, Dominic Raab, actually, foreign minister for UK, pointed that out, that I think that is the window to come back to the deal for the US, because yeah, and because if US is back in the deal and then conservatives win, then conservatives can say that, all right, this is a deal that has been signed. We have to
Yeah.
honor our international commitments, blah, blah, blah. But if there is an election and if there is a bitter election campaign in which conservatives go all the way, anti-American, and we are not going to, we've been betrayed, it will be far harder for them when they are in power to just do a U-turn and come to a deal with the US. It's not impossible. It has happened before during the last 40 years of Islamic Republic, and in many other cases around the world that uh, they say something in the election campaign and then immediately do the opposite. But it will be much harder, I think. So yeah, there is a very short window, very small window. We'll see if there is any further action. But um, I mean, I'm clearly biased because I have Iranian roots and stuff, but I do think at this point, the ball is in the America's court in terms of like they have to, give something considering the last 4 years
Yeah.
and all
No,
that.
100%.
But everybody's trying to, preserve their own interests, so or maximize their own interest in this case.
Yeah.
Now, I forgot to mention that, by the way, that there is still the threat that Americans and Europeans are trying to get IAEA's ruling council to condemn Iran's actions of reducing its commitments to the nuclear deal and limiting inspections and pretty much abandoning snap inspections. And Iran has threatened that if there is such a condemnation in one way or another, they didn't say specifically that there were few parliamentarians or MPs in Iran that they did say that if that happens, Iran must abandon the agreement with the agency. But so far, the officials from the government have said that there will be appropriate action, which may refer to the fact that they may at least further reduce their cooperation with the agency, or perhaps even abandon the agreement that is in place for 3 months.
Okay. Yeah. And then so there's plenty more news, right, concerning kind of Iran and the region.
Yeah, this is a bit less to do with Iran, but there was but this is a typical type of thing that we like to cover here. But there was an attack on an Israeli cargo vessel ship in the Sea of Oman, which today, interestingly, I found that it's also referred to as Gulf of Oman. I always thought it's a sea, but anyway, it was attacked. There was an explosion. First, it was described as a mysterious explosion, and there hasn't been any further concrete evidence or explanations coming out. But as soon as it happened, Benny Gantz, the candidate in the Israeli elections and a former ally of Netanyahu, and a former, even before that, a former uh, arch nemesis of Netanyahu, the leader of the Blue and White Coalition Party Alliance, or whatever it's called. He said that he was the Minister of Defense. He is the Minister of Defense. He said that Iran is a suspect and in that explosion. And then less than a day later, Netanyahu came out and said that we think Iran is definitely behind this explosion. Iranian officials obviously claim that it's this has nothing to do with them. Strongly rejected the accusations and said that this is the typical game that Israel plays to ramp up tensions against Iran and make Iran the bad guy in the region. Personally, I find it difficult to believe that Iran would do that because I don't know. It's possible that The thing is, unlike what they like to claim in a lot of mainstream media, Iran does not have a full control on its militia, on the militia forces like Yemeni forces or Hezbollah that it supports. They are largely independent, especially in internal matters, and some of them, the more extreme ones, may act on their own. So it's possible that a group connected to Iran somehow may have had something to do with this. But the idea that Iranian regime or Iranian government was involved in this, I find it highly unlikely because it was a cargo vessel, it was an explosion of not much significance. I have my theories that has more to do with Israeli elections because in the Israeli elections, Netanyahu is the real threat to Netanyahu's prime ministerial ambitions. Sorry, are the extreme right-wing parties led by people like Naftali Bennett and Gideon Sa'ar. And even though they've been going down in polls, I think Netanyahu is trying to, I mean, obviously he's trying to put the international pressure on Iran as well. But I think this blaming Iran this quickly without any investigation, without any evidence, points to the fact that they are trying to top each other in the Israeli election in terms of who's tougher, who's more about Israeli security and such and such.
Yeah,
So
it's really hard to believe anything that the Israelis would be saying about this. About Iran. The Israeli government lies nonstop, so it's really hard. But I just want to also pick up on another thing that you said about Iran not having control over all the militias in Iraq and all this, which makes complete sense to me. But this whole Gulf of Oman and this ship, I guess Iran, I'm looking at the map right now, I guess Iran would technically, like from Iranian territory, have access to where this ship was from the south, right? From the southeast, technically.
Sure.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Yemenis probably do as
Yeah.
well. But no, my point was, for
Yeah,
example,
your point, I understood it wasn't with that. I was just...
at least in my view, for example, European countries in terms of foreign policy, at least during the last decade, it's been pretty much proven clearly that they are followers of the US when it comes to big things. These independent militia groups or groups that are trying to become a state or become political parties like
independent militia groups outside of Iran you're referring to, so
yes,
Iraq,
like Yemen,
Syria, and Yemen.
We don't have any militia
yeah, of course, yeah.
Organized armed forces, but like Yemeni Houthis, all these groups, their relationship with Iran is much like the relationship of Europe with the US. Yes, there is support. Yes, there is communication. Yes, there is even on a strategic stuff. They have to follow certain rules or certain directions from Tehran. But it's not like they're micromanaged, and it's not like we are talking about a war situation. That especially guerrilla warfare, where there are these small cells independent of each other, where they can act independently. So I find it hard to believe that.
No, that's very, and it's actually interesting. I was watching the analysis news the other day, and they had someone on Yemen, a Yemen advocate, and actually this is the Yemen part where the Houthis are much bigger than small militias. But she was just saying that Saudi is backed by the US and the Houthis are backed by the Iran. This is not fair to put them on the same level. Yes, the Houthis might be they might affiliate with the Iranians, they're on the same side, you can say, but in terms of material support that the Saudis get from the US, you can't even compare it in any way to any kind of support or a little bit of intelligence that the Houthis could get from Iran.
Yeah, exactly. It's not comparable. The US has the largest military force in the world. They have the best military equipment in the world. And I mean, I think it's important to note that the evidence of Iran's material support for Houthis is very limited. Most of the evidence suggests that Iran gave them know-how and
Hmm.
perhaps has given them some raw materials to do shit. But it's not, by the way, because perhaps Iran wants to give them more material support, but because Yemen is pretty much sort of under siege because of the way it is. And there was a thing, I think we reported on it, if I'm not mistaken, that there was for example, Iranian airplane, at least supposedly for humanitarian, like there were humanitarian goods on the airplane. I'm sure there may have been arms in it for smuggling as well. But for example, I think Saudis said that they're gonna bomb that plane if it lands, and it didn't land. So just the level of support that Iran can give to Yemen is very limited. Let's
Yeah.
put aside how much it wants to give it support it can
No,
give
exactly.
to.
And
And
I re
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and I was gonna say, and I recall clearly 3 to 4 years ago they were trying really hard to find evidence of, Iran sending guns and weapons to the Houthis, and they found, like, there was this one boat here with some weapons or stuff. I mean, I don't think you need to smuggle machine guns into Yemen that bad, I'm sure.
Well, the real worry is
It,
missiles and
yeah.
yeah, and to be honest, Iran seems to be more in like they this is the same thing they did with Hezbollah. They sell the technology, they don't sell the equipment itself. So that seems to be the case with the same with the Houthis. But and the I like Yemen. It's kind of like this is my view about it's kind of like Cuba of Iran. Because Cuba, in again my view of history, was not something that Soviet Union wanted to get involved to, but because Fidel Castro came up and suddenly he saw that Americans aren't backing him, so he started espousing socialism. So he keeps his independence. So he sort of, they had to basically go for that.
Hmm.
Yemen sort of seems sort of similar situation for Iran in terms that they didn't really want it to get involved. It became crazy and it became it's the civil war and all that, and then Houthis, they asked for support, and there are some strategic, things to be gained there. Having a war near Saudis, the what do you call it? The waterway there. I forget the name. It has a very beautiful Arabic name, Mandala. I forget. Anyway,
On the
so there
left
are
of Yemen.
yes, on
Yeah.
the left to the west of Yemen.
Yeah.
So I do think Iran was sort of dragged into this more than I'm sure there were people within the regime that wanted this, but I think as a whole, the reason they went to it was more because it has started rather than they were the ones who started it. But interestingly,
Definitely.
but I mean, Biden's inactions and, to be honest, counterproductive actions hasn't gone unnoticed. Trito Parsi, who's one of the perhaps the biggest expert on Iranian-U.S. foreign relations in modern times, he excuse me, he wrote a great article in The Guardian, which I suggest everybody take a look at. And he wrote, I think, articles for other places as well. And he did an interview on The Hill that's worth checking out too. And he pointed out that sadly, it seems Biden is following more of Trump's policy towards Iran. And even though he did say in a speech that diplomacy is back, so is bombings. And he correctly pointed out that it took Trump 4 months in his presidency to bomb Syria. That happened with Biden in less than a month or about a month. So, things are not looking good and people are noticing it. So people, I mean experts. I'm no expert, but at least the ones I've been reading. I would say that there has been a lot of attacks on Biden in the mainstream media, and that he's losing the leverage that Trump created. Trump himself in a speech referred to that I had created this leverage and Biden is basically destroying it. So I think Biden is trying to basically play that centrist game as always, but as Trita Parsi and others have pointed out, I think that may lead to a far worse situation, in far worse and far more deteriorated relationship between US and Iran.
Yeah, no, definitely. Sounds like it. So we wanted to, in this video, talk also a little bit about CPAC, but there were, I think, maybe one or two more stories from the region before we get there, right? Including you're telling me about a small Iran-Turkey spat and maybe some other things that I missed.
Sure, sure. Yeah, the Iran-Turkey spat was an interesting one. There was the Iranian ambassador to Iraq did an interview with a Kurdistani television channel, and in that interview he condemned Turkish military movements in the northern Iraq because he said that it violates Iraqi sovereignty and Turkey should respect that. Then the Turkish ambassador in Iraq tweeted that Iran is the last country that should talk about Iraq's sovereignty. I think referring to the fact that Iranian troops are there and Iran has a lot of interest there, businesses, blah blah blah. So does Turkey, by the way. But I guess Iran could argue that we are invited, technically. Turkey isn't. But then it kind of escalated to an extent. Turkish newspapers accused Iran of supporting PKK, which is a separatist or at least a Kurdish rights advocate group or a separatist group, depending if you listen to Turkish sources or Kurdish sources. It's a
Pretty
violent.
much, pretty much Turkey's number one enemy, right?
Turkish number one terrorist enemy. They
Yeah.
consider them a terrorist group and a separatist group. They accused Iran of supporting them, and they said I forget the name, Hayat or something. One of the biggest Turkish newspapers claimed that there are 500 PKK fighters and leaders within Iran. Iran supports them materially, and then Iran denied these allegations and claimed that Turkey is the one who supports Islamist terrorists and all that. And both countries called their respective ambassadors to the office of the foreign secretary. So tensions got really high there. And it was interesting because Turkey and Iran during the last few years seem to have been on the same page on most issues. But this again showed that, while they may agree on certain issues short term, long term strategically, Iran and Turkey are rivals in Iraq, in Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan, in all these things, as they've been rivals for many years. So that tension sort of picked through again a bit. That was quite interesting. Regarding Middle East, you also had the recent
Yeah, sorry,
report.
can I just say one thing about the
Sure, sure.
Kurds? I just want to say that Turkey's sensitivity on the Kurds and the Kurdish issue is insane. This is just like one story I heard secondhand, but when I was at the UN, they actually found like Turkey saw that there were some UN staff which were in some part of Iraq and they were in a restaurant having dinner and there was some kind of Kurdish flag in the background somewhere. They didn't even know, and that was enough for Turkey to get all like involved and trying to bring some kind of punishment for these staff employees that were
Yeah,
just in a restaurant and they had no idea.
yeah, Turkey is very. I mean, to be fair, separatist movements everywhere in the
Yeah.
world are taken super seriously. But I do think that if further development of Kurdish regions are needed if they want to reduce tensions and reduce terrorist activities. So far I mean, to be fair, Erdogan has been much better than the military dictator and the nationalistic leaders before him who would just massacre Kurds.
Hmm.
But the last few years tensions have ramped up, perhaps to do with the fact that Kurds have sort of reached semi-autonomous status both in Iraq and in Syria. So
Well, it
Turkey is a
really
bit.
ramped up in that post or like even during ISIS fight, post ISIS fight, so like 2 3 years ago really.
Because Syria disintegrated and
Yeah.
Kurdish regions became independent, and now there was no central authority, and they could much easier support separatist Kurds in Turkey. So
Hmm.
and it's important to point out that uh, uh, how do I say this? Separate Kurds in Iraq, Syria, and Turkey have far more in common with each other. Although there are so many differences, so much fragmentation in terms of tribal makeup of these countries, but Kurds, for example, in Iran, they a lot of them are Shia or that type of thing. But Kurds in Syria and Turkey, for example, they are very closer to
Hmm.
each other. So obviously that makes Turkey worried about separatism and all that. No, but besides that, I just was
Yeah.
gonna, mention the fact that U.S. released a report naming Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman MBS as the culprit in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. But obviously, they didn't put any sanctions or they didn't do anything. So the left has been criticizing them a lot. Not the left that we usually talk about, the more centrist left, because I think it's easy to criticize on these things. And I think it was a horrible crime. I don't think anybody should have that much power to have people killed and chopped up. But at the same time, I don't see how could US has no jurisdiction over a foreign leader. So, I don't see what can they do really. I don't know what they expect Joe Biden to do. What, invade Saudi now, or what?
But I'm glad that you brought this up. Do you think there is anything serious happening with the US's position and relation with Saudis? Like anything serious where like in 3 to 6 months we'll remember and would say that there's been a little shift or no?
I think they're not going to be. Yeah, they're gonna somewhat try to tame Saudi ambitions in the region. But no, not as significant. No, no, I wouldn't say it's a watershed moment.
No,
Biden
not
comes.
even that, but like any significance to it, would you say there's like any shift in the US and Saudi relationship?
Mm, I think compared to Trump years, it's going to be, yeah, more nuanced relationship. And by the way, there was this report that US said that they are hoping for a Saudi-Iran pact if Saudi is okay with it. So no, I don't think it's going to be any, like, they are still in many ways the politicians are in the pocket of Saudi lobby and that type of thing. And at the same time, a strategic interest of America is tied to Saudi for now. So I no, it's going to be they're going to be a slightly tamer in their rhetoric and in some of their actions against Iran. At least for now. Who knows if there is no deal and a conservative president comes to power in Iran, then who knows? Maybe it becomes worse than Trump. Because as
Yeah.
I mentioned, Trump took 4 months to attack Syria, and these guys they less than a month.
Yeah, yeah. He quickly attacked Afghanistan, though I remember that.
Oh yeah, he
With
dropped the
Trump, he
mother.
had that. Yeah, Marwa.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? What else? We had CPAC. Anything else on the region, or any interesting takes
No, no,
about
but
CPAC?
talking of Trump, he came to CPAC, which is a conference of Republican. I don't know what it stands for actually.
Yeah, I
Uh,
just checked it out. So it starts with conservative. It's
conservative.
Conservative Political Action Conference.
All right. But do you want to tell us about the favorite joke first before I
Uh,
get into the nitty
no, I think
gritty?
everybody's seen that. That was just really seemed like Trump Jr. failed with his T-Pack T-Pack joke, which I was shocked that I was shocked that he failed though. He was shocked too, I think.
I think so, yeah. I think that he didn't realize that these type of things, especially with Corona, it was far less populated and people were sitting,
Yeah.
with social distancing. And now they're just basically donors and, people these are not the usual people who show up at Trump rallies who are mostly consist of normal people in terms of normal as in income and, that type of thing.
Yeah, no,
So
that's very true, exactly. He wasn't at a rally.
yeah, yeah, he was in
Yeah.
Netherlands, and it was fascinating. It was very fascinating because, first of all, he said that the idea that he's going to start a third party is fake news, and he's not going to do that, which is interesting. And a lot of analysts, including Kyle Kalinske, one of our favorites, pointed out that why would he, when you have a party already, he already has, like the latest polls show him with a favorite, like within Republican uh, voters, he's got above 55% approval. He has like a two-digit distance with the nearest rival, who's Mike Pence or Donald Jr. And so he already owns a party. Why would he own another? Makes sense to me.
And it
So
would
that's
also go against his own strengths, like building something that's not his
yeah, yeah.
strength. I guess he
No,
knows himself well as a 80-year-old man.
yeah, he's not the
He's like,
most
I know I can't follow through
active
with
of.
this. Let's not make
Yeah.
things too complicated.
Yeah, this is, I'm gonna have to organize,
Yeah.
hire people,
Uh,
blah blah. On the other hand, though, but it was an interesting speech because he did. First, by the way, regarding Iran, he said that yeah, he's destroying all the leverage I created. He's lifting sanctions left and right. I don't know what world he lives in, or I mean, I understand. I just yeah, I don't understand how he can get away with this amount of lies. Anyway, and then the best part, the part that I enjoyed just as much as I enjoyed the debates in primary 2016, was when he started naming his enemies. He started saying that Republicans are united. They never backstab each other. They never betray each other. Whatever you say about them, they're always behind each other. Which is complete bullshit, by the way. Democrats are the most fickle of all, political parties in the world. And then he started saying, all right, but we have enemies. I have enemies. They don't have people like Mitt Romney. And then he started Mitt Romney, Susan Collins. He listed all the senators. And there were boos as well as cheers because this is, as we said, is a mix of a thing. And then he started listing his enemies in Congress. Representative blah blah blah, Representative blah. Oh, that guy. And then he got to Liz Cheney, former Vice President Dick Cheney's daughter, and the person who's probably right now is the flag bearer for the Republicans that
yeah.
hate Trump. And then he ended with a, I'm gonna, maybe I'm thinking of maybe beating them for the third time. So not only he doesn't accept that he lost the election in 2020, he's gonna probably use it as a way of and he might, there's a good chance he's gonna run and gonna use it as a way to shore up his base, fire
I
up his
mean,
base.
for sure he's gonna run. There's no doubt.
You think so?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think his laziness is still a big factor
No,
in his
but he has fun with that. But with that stuff, he's not lazy. I mean, going
rallies. Yeah.
rallies and debating, and I guess he needs to find himself a social media platform too. I'm sure he will by then. Somewhere to start putting out messages.
That's going to be difficult. Parlor, they really went with
Yeah.
Parlor. They really made an example. They cut off its web, services and all that. So yeah, it will be interesting to see.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Very, very nice. Anything else, or did we cover everything?
No, I think we covered everything regarding these issues.
It's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
interesting. I mean, the Iran nuclear stuff are not going away. Every few days, every week, there are some developments right now.
sure. To be fair, and we do realize there are a lot of other news out there in the world
Yeah.
that it's not just Iran nuclear
Yeah.
stuff, but this is our strength, and I think we can bring a somewhat of a informative angle to this. So yeah, I mean we do realize that there is a revolution in Myanmar, but I don't think
Yeah.
we have much contribute more than what we've read in mainstream, stuff. I haven't read about history of Myanmar or something, so
Hmm.
we try to
I mean,
stick
I
less.
just heard a great interview when it comes to Myanmar. It was from last week, Vijay Prashad on the Gray Zone, if anyone's
Oh,
interested.
fantastic. I'll
Yeah.
check that. Grey Zone does fantastic stuff,
No,
by the way. In terms of journalism, they're great.
no, for sure. Okay, all right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you like this content, and we'll see you in our next video. Thank you.